The Johnny Depp and Amber Heard defamation case that took place in the spring of this year captured international attention in a uniquely horrifying way. It was almost inescapable. One of the things that's been especially irritating throughout is the amount of disinformation that's been floating around, not only about the facts of the case, but about the way people were treating it back in 2016 when the story first came out. To be fully transparent, I don't think I've ever seen a movie with either Johnny or Amber in it in my life. However, I am and always have been a massive fan of reading and following celebrity gossip, so I've been paying attention to this case basically since the initial reports of the divorce filing. The way people have been talking about certain aspects of this case has been so absurd that I feel compelled in some way to preserve a record of what was actually going on at the time. People have this bizarre misconception that in 2016, Amber controlled the media narrative and went on this huge press tour to tell everyone how evil he is. They say she took advantage of people's blind belief in women and he's finally getting his chance to tell his side of the story, and that he's never had that before. Johnny himself has claimed this. This historical understanding of the pop culture landscape at the time is just completely divorced from reality, though. His narrative of events was very clearly the one that dominated the press and also the one people wanted to believe. Partially because he's well-liked and one of the biggest actors on the planet, while she was a C-list actress that people didn't really care for. And partially because he ran an extremely aggressive PR campaign against her. This is something that was incredibly obvious at the time and reflected in public opinion, as I'll go over. To start, I want to just lay out what their respective positions are about the abuse. Amber claims that he was extremely jealous and controlling throughout their relationship, and that he often became physically abusive when he drank, starting quite early on in the relationship. The severity of the abuse began to get worse as his alcohol consumption increased. She can point to 14 specifically memorable incidents with varying levels of documentation. She claims that she didn't fight back physically for the first few years of the relationship, but began to in self-defense around the spring of 2015. Despite what a lot of people discussing this case have claimed, if you take a step back and look at the claims being made and the supporting evidence, Amber's version of events is corroborated by almost all of the contemporaneous evidence, and both Amber Heard and her witnesses' accounts of the events have remained consistent over the past 6 years. Johnny claims that he never hit her, and that rather she was the controlling, abusive one. She spent years planting evidence and recruiting her friends into this elaborate hoax that culminated in filing a restraining order to get money out of the divorce, even though they didn't have a prenuptial agreement, and she was legally entitled to half, no matter what, in California. I realize that presented like this, it seems like I'm giving him a very uncharitable interpretation of the claims he's making, but these were the fundamental arguments that his legal team was making, because she was reporting abuse from him to her therapist as early as 2012. This seems like a less plausible explanation for the alleged abuse on the face of it. But, again, if you actually look at the corroborating evidence and the way his and his witnesses' stories have changed over the years, as well as other things his team was caught doing during the UK trial, there's almost nothing to support this hoax theory. I'll get into the details, but I think the best place to start is the phone conversation that is the origin of the clip people seem to think is a smoking gun that proves Amber is the real abuser.
Hello, Johnny. Tell them Johnny Depp. Johnny Depp, man, I'm a victim too of domestic violence.
As an aside, this is an extremely minor thing, but it's very indicative of how small things have been twisted. The audio, as it's been spread around, had subtitles that said, "Tell him Johnny Depp, a man, I'm a victim too of domestic violence." But if you listen to the audio, she doesn't say the letter A before the word man at all. He had said, "Come on, man," in the preceding sentence, and she said, "man," in the same way in response. As in, "Come on, man, this is unbelievable." Again, this is a small thing, but it shifts the meaning of what she's saying quite a bit. She's not saying men can't be victims of domestic violence. She's saying that Johnny Depp was not, which is obviously the contention in this whole case. But that's a very different statement. We'll get into this a little more within the context of the phone call. So, this is a phone conversation that occurred between Johnny and Amber in early June of 2016, a few days after the restraining order was filed. Johnny is secretly recording it and seems to be trying to get this whole thing resolved outside of court. Amber is upset with the way his team has handled the media, and she claims that Laura Wasser, who is known for her TMZ connections, was the one that leaked the initial divorce filing to the press, despite her attempts to keep it quiet. She says no one found out about it for days because she had her lawyers file at the end of the day along with other paperwork. But as soon as his lawyer filed, TMZ had a story out in minutes. They talk about this for a bit, and Johnny says he'll make some calls and get his lawyer to accept a mediator. At a certain point in the conversation, they begin talking about the call to the cops that was made during the final incident between them in May of 2016, where she alleges he threw a phone at her and attacked her while her friend Io was on the line.
Serious. I was like, okay, look, first of all, I wasn't there that day. And so he got very agitated by the fact that she and I thought it was funny. And he started to get more and more agitated, and I could hear him walk away from the phone. He came clomping back down the stairs. I heard like a noise, and then the phone dropped. And he said to her, "Oh, you think I hit you? You think I fucking hit you? What if I peel your fucking hair back?" And then I heard the phone drop again, and then I heard her scream. I remember her screaming. And I hung up the phone, and I called Raquel immediately because I know that she lives one door away, and her and her boyfriend Josh, who's a big dude, would be able to get there the fastest. And I called her, texted her right away, and I hung up with her and immediately called 911 in New York. And then I called a friend of mine in LA who I knew had met Amber a number of times.
This is the incident they were talking about in the famous clip. Amber begins to explain that she told Io to call because she genuinely thought he was going to kill her that night. Johnny interjects by saying he lost his finger and had a mineral can thrown at his face, which, within the context of him recording this conversation, seems like a way to deflect, because he's not alleging that either of those things happened the night of the police call. She responds by saying it wasn't a fair fight and argues that no one in their right mind is going to believe that he was the victim in the situation. He says it doesn't matter if it was a fair fight, and she responds by saying that it does matter because he's so much stronger, and that is the reason that she felt she was in danger to the point where she needed Io to call 911.
I did not call the cops. I gave them no statement.
Io called the
I did
cops.
not call the cops.
You told Io to call the cops.
I did not call the cops, and I did not give them any statement when they came. I've been trying to protect you.
You told Io to call the cops.
When while it was happening?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, because the last time that it got crazy between us, I really did think I was going to lose my life, and I thought you would do it on accident. And I told you that. I said, oh my God, I thought for the first time.
Amber, I lost a finger, man. Come on. I had a mineral can of mineral spirits thrown at my nose.
You can please tell people that it was a fair fight and see what the jury and judge think. Tell the world, Johnny. Tell them Johnny Depp. Johnny Depp, man, I'm a victim too of domestic violence, and
yes.
It's a fair fight. And see how many people believe or side with you.
It doesn't matter if it's a fair fight.
Exactly, because you're bigger and you're stronger. And so when I say that I thought you could kill me, that doesn't mean you counter with you also that you lost your own finger. I am not trying to attack you here. I'm just trying to point out the fact of why I said call 911. Because you had your hands on me after you threw a phone at my face, and it's gotten crazy in the past, and I truly thought I need to stop this madness before I get hurt.
Oh my God.
And I never think about myself that way. I never defend myself that way. I never see myself as a victim. It's
Right.
to a fault,
All right. Yeah.
And I when they came, I did not cooperate with them. It has been used against me, not by the media, by your side, who said
A lot of people will still disagree, but the context of the conversation and the correct subtitles dramatically change what she was communicating. It has generally been presented as her villainously taunting him, but she really seems to be claiming that the physical altercations they got into were always heavily influenced in his favor, and that she's not even trying to argue about other things that went on during the relationship. She's trying to explain why she told her friend to call 911. It's notable that the most commonly circulated version of this clip from the recordings, given to the Daily Mail by Johnny's lawyer Adam Waldman, is only 30 seconds long. So, not only does it cut out multiple times before and after the clip where she said she believed her life to be in danger, but it also usually appears without any context. The next part of this phone conversation is also pretty interesting because it gives us a little insight into the press coverage of the time following, which leads me to the one part of this whole saga that has received some of the most revisionism, and that is that the media and the public were on her side originally. This was never the case. To set the stage, I think we kind of have to start with the divorce story in which she discusses earlier in the conversation. As soon as Depp's lawyer, Laura Wasser, filed, TMZ had the exclusive divorce announcement, and their headline was, "Amber Heard files for divorce on heels of his mum's death." TMZ then published an exclusive claiming that his family, and specifically his mum, hated her. Her team responded telling them that it's not true and that she loved his mum and was even managing the schedules for her nurses. This appears to be supported by what Depp said in court about Amber's relationships with her, contradicting the TMZ title. This is the pattern that a lot of the media coverage of their divorce took. The same day, TMZ also published a story claiming that Amber was going shopping at Tiffany's the day after filing for divorce. This also turned out to be false, as the picture was taken a month earlier, something TMZ would have known considering they almost certainly had to license that paparazzi photo, and it was dated as April 27th. Instead of publishing a retraction or any story clarifying that it was not from the day after the divorce, they just deleted the article entirely. Lainey from Lainey Gossip actually had a really good analysis of the initial divorce statement from Depp and how their respective teams were handling the immediate aftermath. She noted that TMZ immediately started posting stories about how his mum hated her, with the implication being that she was using him. She noted that the tone of the statement his publicist took out was unusually hostile. She also pointed out that his publicist, who Depp had worked with for 4 decades, is one of the most powerful publicists in Hollywood. Said publicist exclusively deals with very famous clients like Daniel Craig and Ryan Gosling and Jared Leto, and is known to do anything for them. She commented on the extremely difficult uphill battle Amber has to fight if she doesn't want to get totally buried. So, as we heard in the phone call, Amber kind of gives specifics about certain things that are coming up in the press and why she believes his team is responsible.
By the media, by your side, who said, look...
What do you mean? Where's the media? It's all out in the media. Why is my...
TMZ is in your pocket and you don't even know it? Oh, I mean, it's... Well, I was at the courthouse while TMZ is posting things. At the courthouse, while I'm at the courthouse, they're posting things about the cops never coming, right? Then we provide proof. Then they say, oh, just one set of police officers. Then they retract their story, but they don't actually retract it like an objective media source would. No, what do? They just come out with a new lie. They go, oh, well, it was just one pair of cops, and she said it was 2. And I said, no, here's the proof. We just subpoenaed the building for the actual security records to prove that was wrong. Okay, then what did they do? They came out with a new lie, a different lie. Okay, well, it was this. I mean, every step of the way I've had to take has been because that news source is in Marty's pocket, in Laura, like that's from Laura's source.
Okay, listen.
Every step of the way.
All right, listen, here's the... All right, fine. You believe what you believe.
It obviously still could have been Heard that tipped them off, but, as the initial restraining order story mentions, Depp's lawyer, Laura Wasser, was in attendance on his behalf in court that day. As mentioned before, she's known for having a close relationship with TMZ. The day after TMZ got the exclusive on the Johnny Depp divorce, they also got the exclusive announcement on the Khloe Kardashian divorce that Laura Wasser was also filing. She's done TMZ live before. TMZ has even run fluff pieces that are basically just ads for Laura Wasser's online divorce side business. These aren't the kinds of stories TMZ is usually running unless you have a relationship with them. one where you're maybe regularly giving them information. TMZ immediately had an exclusive on a handwritten letter from Vanessa Paradis and a statement from his ex-wife from the 80s. They had stories about him being nice to all people in Portugal, painting him as a great guy. Lainey also pointed out in a different article that the exclusive about Amber's previously unknown arrest in 2009 was pretty clearly another shot from the Depp team. This is pretty obvious if you've ever paid attention to how TMZ operates. While it is known that TMZ constantly has people going through court documents in Los Angeles to find celebrity dirt, they aren't looking through old court records in Washington State, a place where Amber has never lived. They wouldn't know to unless they had been tipped off. In response to the story, Tassia Vayahari's publicist released a statement claiming that Amber was wrongfully accused. This sort of back and forth is pretty normal in high-profile divorces, but it speaks to how both teams were battling it out in the media behind the scenes, with neither Johnny nor Amber making direct statements to the press. When Johnny's team brought in the surprise former TMZ witness, someone who didn't really present any new information, the witness implied that Amber's team was the one that tipped them off about the deposition.
2016, where she was giving a deposition.
So what did you do in relation to that tip?
I dispatched camera people to a parking lot adjacent to a law office in which she would be arriving to, so we could get the footage of her arriving for the deposition.
Do you typically send paparazzis to parking lots of law offices?
No, not at all.
Did you get the shot of Miss Heard on August 6, 2016?
We did.
He neglected to mention that the law office wasn't just any law office. It was TMZ's Laura Wasser's law office. Before Amber even got there that morning at 10:55, TMZ was running the story claiming that she violated a court order by not showing up, with a massive red sign crossed over her face. When she showed up at 11:30, the TMZ videographer repeatedly asks her why she's so late. This seems the type of question that would be asked when the reporter has been given a time and place, that she would be there by someone on Depp's team. Her team claimed that they had called ahead and that the lawyers expected her to be there at 11, that the additional delay was due to trying to avoid the paparazzi stationed in the front of the building. Paparazzi we know for a fact were there because TMZ also posted a story earlier that morning with photos of one of Johnny's lawyers arriving at the office. So going back to what they were discussing in the phone call, throughout all of this, TMZ is posting all these exclusives from Depp's team, saying Amber was lying. From there, they were just aggregated onto every entertainment news site in existence. In some instances, as would be the case with stories from his exes, there was not much of a response Amber's team could make. She obviously couldn't speak of their experiences. In other cases, like the police issue she mentioned, the stories were somewhat disprovable because they could use security footage to prove that the stories were false. But then, as she said, they would just come out with a new story. In the phone call, Amber begins talking about how his team's media campaign has basically forced her into a corner. They consistently call her a liar, and she has to provide a continuous amount of evidence on top of what was included in the restraining order to prove that she wasn't lying. Tabloids initially had access to the information included in the restraining order because restraining orders are public record in California, but the only incidents included in the restraining order were the final two in April and May of 2016. So, in response to Depp's team, Amber's team started combating the stories that called her a liar by providing evidence about other incidents. Evidence like the private plain text messages. This is where the People magazine cover with details about the December 15th incident seems to have come from.
All right, fine. You believe what you believe. I'm gonna call to these people. I'm gonna take care of this. See what is going on. I will get back to you. Otherwise, listen. As far as I can tell right now, it sounds like you want to go to court and you want to this up real bad.
I just want to clear my name. I've been telling all the lawyers this from the beginning, and your lawyers knew this.
You cannot clear up your name now.
Don't let them lie to you. Don't let them lie to you. I have said only this from the very beginning. I only have my integrity. And the unfortunate thing is...
And what about mine?
They need a step further.
What about mine?
They keep they keep take. That's what it keeps. I'm trying to say to you, literally in words. I'm out of my mouth. That's what I'm trying to say to you. Every step of the way, I have said to them, the thing is, they're hurting Johnny by this because every time that they call me a liar, or they say this is not true, or Steven says this text message does not actually happen, or that your security guards, which by the way was a follow-up to your security guards thing they never saw abuse happening. The same security guards who, by the way, have said to me multiple times that I was going to get killed.
Here she's talking about the statements his bodyguards made to TMZ as well as the ones Stephen Deuters made. The bodyguards claimed that he was 20 feet away from her when she was screaming for help, which is disputed not only by Rocky Pennington, who was in the room with them before the bodyguards were, but reportedly didn't even match what the bodyguards were saying at the time. Josh Drew said that when he went downstairs to bring him Johnny's phone, one of the bodyguards asked if she was okay, to which he responded, "Are you fucking kidding me?" He beat the shit out of her, again, and you guys stood by and watched it. Jerry Judge is said to have responded by saying, "It's not my business. It's between husband and wife. He barely touched her." This kind of speaks to the power in the relationship that makes it different from almost every other domestic violence case. As we all know, this wouldn't go both ways. Johnny was paying over $2 million a year for 24/7 bodyguards. If he snapped his fingers, they would rush into any room and physically remove anyone, including his wife if he requested, because he's the boss and it's their job to protect him and to do what he wants them to do. She didn't have that during the relationship. She has texts from her mother as early as 2013, where her mother is telling her that if his bodyguards aren't going to keep her safe from him, she needs to get her own. Obviously, as we can tell from the financial documents from the divorce, she almost certainly didn't have the means for that. I don't think her team responded to the bodyguard story directly, but they did respond to his team's general assertion that she was lying about the abuse by releasing the text from the private plane incident. For context, in this incident, Amber claims that he was drunk and upset about her doing a movie with James Franco, and that he berated her, called her names, and kicked her on the plane. This incident was particularly humiliating because it happened in front of people. Johnny's account is that he was sober, quietly drawing in his notebook on the plane, and she was actually the one yelling at him while he refused to engage with her. The problem is his assistant texted Amber about Johnny's behavior at the time. Depp's assistant said, "When I told him he kicked you, he cried." But when these text messages came out, Deuters went to TMZ and claimed they were doctored and that he had never said it. In response, Amber's team got a forensic analyst to confirm that the texts were in fact legitimate. By the time the UK trial began, Deuters obviously couldn't continue with the lie about the authenticity of the texts, so he claimed instead that he was just placating her. This excuse doesn't really work, as Johnny was also sending messages to unrelated parties where he talked about his bad behavior on the flight. The kick also came up in the big 4-hour-long therapy recording from September 2015 that most of the audio clips used in this case are from. She mentions it as one of the only other times she felt like there was no hope for the relationship. Johnny is very cognizant that they're recording, and he tells her she needs to say something that she did wrong, and then when she clarifies that she's talking about the plane from Boston in 2014, not one they had recently taken, he says, "Oh, okay."
Before I have walked away from you and you're drunk and fucked up and did things that are like, but Toronto was like the plane that the plane where you kicked me. It was so bad and so unprovoked.
Wait.
Sorry.
The plane when I kicked you. You can't just reference it like with the plane that I kicked you.
You know which one I'm talking about, right? Like the one from a long time ago.
It's on the tape recorder. If you're going to say that I kicked you, you'll say everything else you did.
On the plane that I'm talking about is the plane from Boston. I did nothing to you. I mean, everyone can attest. Everyone will back that up. I did nothing to you that time. You were fucked up. You're real fucked. I'm talking about the long time ago. That was the only time in my relationship with you. Remember, I went back to New York that I felt so unsure about us was after Toronto. And I sat on that all week and cried every fucking day.
It was after Toronto. When? This Toronto? I didn't kick you on the fucking plane.
I know, I said that was the only other time in our relationship that I felt like this.
This is an important text exchange in the case because not only is explicitly claiming in the text that Johnny was physically abusive to her, but in her response she talks about the other times it's happened. In a way, that suggests he's aware that it's an ongoing issue, and instead of being surprised or confused when she brings up the other incidents, he responds with, "I know." This is again before they were married. So, if this was all a master scheme to secretly plan documentation of imaginary abuse so she can get a big payout in a divorce, it seems unlikely that of all people, she would be telling Johnny's loyal assistant, who would likely be sharing whatever she said to him with Johnny. This issue of Dutra's undying loyalty came up again during the Dutra's testimony in the UK trial, where he was asked if he'd ever stood up to Johnny. Dutra's mentioned a time where the Pirates of the Caribbean producers wanted Johnny to come back to Australia a few days earlier. No one else would bring it up to him, so he sat down with him and asked. According to Dutra's, Johnny respectfully said no. Based on Johnny's text messages to Jerry Judge about this request, though, when Dutra's dared pass this message on, Johnny took it as an act of betrayal and said that Dutra's better remember who pays his checks. Dutra's was noticeably absent from the Virginia trial, likely to keep these text messages out, as they were not able to introduce them without him testifying. This is one of a few major changes Johnny's team made to their case after losing the UK trial, which they in many ways seem to have treated like a test case to prepare for this case. If, as it seems and is plausible, his employees are willing to lie like this to protect him in these situations, it's hard to argue that they wouldn't be lying to protect him with the other incidents. We can see how this plays out with a few cases. Amber has maintained from the start that the first time she ever punched him was 4 years into the relationship, during the incident on the stairs in March of 2015. She claims that it was in defense of her sister, because she thought that he was going to push her sister down the stairs, and to my knowledge, I don't think there has ever been a claim on Johnny's team end that she had ever punched him before this.
Johnny Depp with a closed fist in the history of your relationship with Johnny?
Answer it however you feel you wish to.
One time, Johnny was hitting me, and he was hitting me hard and repeatedly, and I was screaming. Security walks in, and they don't do anything about it. And he makes this motion when Jerry Judge yells "boss," or Sean, I can't remember who it was, and all we had was a little bit of separation, and my sister runs down the stairs. We're on a landing in between 2 flights of stairs. And I just see my little sister with her back to the staircase, and Johnny swings at her, and I don't even wait for any other, I don't hesitate, I don't wait, I just in my head instantly think of Kate Moss and the stairs, and I swung at him. In all of my relationship to date with Johnny, I hadn't landed a blow. And I, for the first time, hit him. Like, actually hit him. Square in the face. He didn't push my sister down the stairs. And all my time of being in that relationship to that point, hadn't even landed one on Johnny. Sure, I had tried to fight back, threw my arms, flailed my arms, hit whenever I could to try to block blows myself, but never landed anything. And Johnny kind of looked stunned and then laughed at me, and then lunged at me again, and before I know it, security stepped in between.
Johnny claims that she attacked him, and it was completely one-sided attack, as he claims he never touched her. His security guard tells the story as well, but interestingly, during the UK testimony, he completely changes the story that was in the witness statement he submitted and claimed that instead of walking in during the middle of the fight, he actually was there with Johnny the whole time. So, his employees corroborate his story, of course, and her sister, of course, corroborates hers. But what we can still look at is the messages that were being sent in response to the incident by witnesses and compare that to the testimony. Johnny's nurse, Debbie Lloyd, texted Johnny's assistant and specified that they had to physically restrain both of them or they would have hurt each other, which makes the testimony of the witnesses who are now saying he never touched her on the stairs seem a lot less credible. Johnny also went and started smashing things in her closet afterwards. There's also the December 15th, 2015 incident, where Johnny himself eventually admitted that he headbutted her. He of course only did this after he found out that there was a recording of him admitting to it, from what I think was the time they met up in San Francisco, the summer they were getting divorced. After he found out about the recording, he testified that it was accidental, as he was trying to restrain her. Despite the eventual acknowledgement that the headbutt happened, Johnny's team continued to argue that all the injuries from that incident, including the ones that were reportedly sustained from the headbutt, were fake despite the photos, the multiple text message exchanges about it at the time, and how to deal with it, including messages to her publicist about having an accident and waiting until the next day to see how bad the bruising would be, because she may have to cancel her scheduled James Corden appearance. Messages to her friends over the next few days about how Johnny was acting afterwards, messages to her therapist about it, her visit to Johnny's doctor to get a concussion test, her friend testifying to stay up all night with her to monitor for concussion symptoms.
She didn't cancel. I don't think I even slept that night watching her just to make sure she didn't.
Is that because you were worried she had a concussion?
Yes.
Her makeup artist testifying to covering the bruises up, and multiple other people testifying to seeing the injuries. Despite all this, his team argues that the injuries didn't actually exist. The stylist that was employed by Johnny for decades claimed she didn't see any bruising, and the nurse who was dropping off medication at her house only saw a lip injury when she stopped by, even though she also testified that she couldn't tell if Amber was wearing makeup or not. This nurse, by the way, also worked under Johnny's private doctor and was hired for Amber by Johnny. After the restraining order was filed, when Johnny was asking the nurse to sign a declaration for him, he texted her to reiterate that he was the client ultimately, and that she was brought in to keep Amber under control. Even the couple's counselor, who was called as one of Johnny's witnesses in the Virginia trial, admitted that she saw the bruises on Amber in person following that incident.
A few minutes ago, you briefly spoke about seeing bruises about an inch on Amber Heard's face. You recall that testimony?
Yes.
And you were making motions with your fingers.
But I was saying multiple. I'm not saying one.
Right. You were seeing multiple bruises on Amber's face.
Yes.
Correct. When you were talking about how the size of it, your fingers were under your eyes. Did you remember seeing the bruises under Amber's eyes?
That's what I recall. They may have been in other places throughout her body. I don't remember, but I do remember her face.
Even in other situations, where there are multiple witnesses who were only party to the aftermath of the alleged incidents, his employees seem to sanitize Johnny's behavior such that they don't match what other people experienced. Following the final incident in May, Depp's bodyguard testified that before Johnny left the building, he went to Penthouse 5, where Josh Drew and a friend of Raquel's were. The bodyguard claims that Johnny told them to get out. Josh Drew nodded and they exited.
I opened up the door for him. We went inside, and that's when I saw Miss Heard's friend, Raquel Pennington's boyfriend, Josh Drew, and another unknown female that I'd never seen before, and there was a small dog kind of walking around. Mr. Depp, I believe he said, "Get the fuck out of my apartment." So Mr. Drew nodded his head and basically said, "Okay." The female picked up the dog, and they exited the front door to that.
Based on the testimony from both of them, it seemed like he was being a bit more aggressive than that. Josh Drew claims that he was aggressively screaming in his face, and Elizabeth Mars claims that Johnny was shouting and behaving erratically and charged at her, so she ran out and hid from him in a communal exercise room upstairs.
I remember he said, "Open this fucking door, get me in here." And he came in, caught eyes with me right away, and beeline for me, screaming, cursing, spitting in my face. I walked calmly to leave, realized that I'd forgotten my keys and the dog, so I turned around and walked back to go get both. He stayed and followed with me, walking, pacing, screaming, cursing, spitting in my face, and I left calmly. At that point, Liz was still in the apartment, and the last look I saw of her is that she bolted around the corner and went upstairs to hide from him.
Had Mr. Depp ever done this to you before?
No.
Did he? How close was he to you when he was when he entered your apartment and was screaming at you?
Close enough for it to be aggressive.
Within a foot?
Yes.
And you said that you originally heard him say, open the fucking door. When he was spitting and screaming at you, what did you recall him saying?
Couldn't tell you. Honestly, it sounded like gibberish. At that point, I don't think I was really hearing anything. It was just, how can I get the hell out of here without something else happening? Because quite frankly, even though he's standing there in front of my face, he's also got, 2 bodyguards right there with him that are bigger than me. What's really going to happen here?
All testifying to that effect, that Johnny charged at you and then you were scared.
He charged towards me, and I was scared. I ran past him.
You didn't run past him because he told everyone in that penthouse to get out of his penthouse?
I ran past him because he ran into the unit, and it scared the shit out of me because he was wasted and screaming. So that's why I ran out. If there's a grown-ass man coming at you and saying, "Get your bitch out of here," and swaying a Magnum-sized bottle of wine, I'm sure, I don't know what anyone do. I can't say what anyone do, but I ran out.
I could go into detail about more of the alleged incidents, but the point here is mainly that despite the way things have been presented, based on the accounts of the people around them as the incidents allegedly happened, Johnny's accounts of these incidents over and over again seem much less credible than hers do. His team has done a very good job of just muddying the waters enough to call everything into question. Again, this started from the second the divorce filing went public. Anyone can search for the old comments. They're all pretty uniformly negative against her, suggesting she was a gold digger. This response didn't really change when the news of the restraining order came out. People loved Johnny Depp, so they were never going to believe her. Even going to spaces on the internet beyond Twitter, there was an academic study done where they collected hundreds of comments from within a month of the story about the restraining order being filed and did a content analysis of these comments. In those comments, 8.8% of the people blamed him and 37% blamed her. Of the people that blamed him, many of them blamed him for not getting a prenuptial agreement or for marrying a snake. The biggest category was still mixed reactions, where people made jokes or talked about themselves, among other things. You also had more of the people who were like, why does anyone care about any of this? Which I always find interesting when you're in the comment section of a specific news Facebook post. The researchers noted that the anger towards the alleged victim was greatly disproportionate to that aimed at Johnny, the alleged perpetrator. They said that it's likely in part because the alleged perpetrator was much better known, but that victim blaming is extremely common. They pointed out that she's not a perfect victim, and since Johnny is so much more well known and well loved, it made people even more likely to dismiss her claims. They also expressed surprise at just how intense and pervasive the victim blaming in the comments was, and that they didn't expect almost 4 times as many people to blame the victim than the perpetrator. This was just what the overwhelming public reaction was at the time, though, and people who were paying attention noticed this as it was happening. There was an article that was written in early June of 2016 in Bitch magazine discussing the public response to Amber's abuse allegations and the bizarre way people have jumped on Johnny's defense. And one of the things that struck me was how the article could have been written yesterday and every single word would just as accurately describe the situation today. Depp supporters are using the exact same bad arguments to call her a liar as they were 6 years ago. The writer says, "So this time I am reminded yet again that it doesn't matter how much proof a woman has when she accuses her partner of violence. It doesn't matter if she is a rich, famous, thin, pretty white lady. It doesn't matter that the simplest explanation for a bruise on her face is that someone hit her, and that the most plausible story is the one she's telling. All that matters is that we live in a culture in which people are more willing to believe that a man has been cruelly and elaborately framed for violence than we are to believe that he's capable of committing it. Is Heard's story really that unbelievable? The picture she's painted of Depp isn't of an evil sociopath. It's of a sad, angry man with substance abuse problems who gets jealous and loses his temper and then regrets what he did once someone tells him how he behaved. The facts are that there hasn't been a single moment since she filed the restraining order that the vast majority of people talking about the case weren't blindly defending Johnny and claiming that she was a liar who was out to get his money. As Johnny claims has happened, everyone just believes him, and people will parrot this talking point and say that people believe her at first and she took advantage of that. People were tearing her apart for daring to smile in a photo the day after filing a restraining order and claiming that the at that point 7-day-old bruise under the eye wasn't there anymore, even though it was, as you can see in other photos. Again, I could go on for ages about this, but if we're still going somewhat chronologically, in August, Amber and Johnny reached a settlement agreement where, among other things, they both agreed to not talk about their marriage, their relationship before marriage, or their divorce to the press. So the press coverage kind of abated. But 2 months after the settlement was reached, Johnny met a lawyer named Adam Waldman, and he began suing people. One of the issues that came up during the UK trial was a recording secretly made by Amber of their interior designer, Laurie Driver, who claimed that Adam Waldman was pressuring her into a statement.
He directly contacted me. He called me on the phone, and then I just didn't pick up. And then the next night, he literally texted me. And so that's when I said, I just kind of pled like, I don't know anything. That wasn't a part of their life that I was exposed to or anything along those lines. I said I knew that it was a difficult relationship at best. But I was peripheral. And so anyway, he was just like, and I said, and I know that summer was the summer that I was planning this big trip to go to Africa. So I wasn't even there that summer. And in my mind, I wasn't. It's been 4 years. So I didn't know anything. And then I got a text from him at like 3 o'clock in the morning, basically calling me a liar and literally saying, well, then you are just part of Amber's conspiratorial group. I mean, this guy is the biggest asshole under the sun. I don't know how you're dealing with this because I've been shaken like for days on this. So he basically was like, he just kept being really slanderous. I said, I'm sorry, I don't know Amber to be that person at all. And I believe her. And then he's like, well, you have to sit there and I need to have a conversation with you on the phone. And if not, we will subpoena you and you will be deposed. I'm like, are they kidding me? And she's going on about, well, do you know about Tasya? And I said, I didn't know any of that. And so then he's like, well, then now you know about it. I'm like, well, okay, great.
He just told you.
He just told me. No, but I know. But it's horrible. It's horrible. I mean, I have not slept for nights because I just didn't even know how to tell you that this has now been brought up and I have to go ahead and tell you about all this information. So he basically said if I didn't sign a declaration, but it doesn't state anything from you at all. It just, he's like, was I aware of Tassio? And I said, well, no, I'm not, but I told you about it the other day. So that's in there. If I didn't, I was going to be deposed, and he's like, and it was going to be $15,000 to $20,000. So I'm telling you now because I need you to know that, and I need your attorneys to then go ahead and get me to do a declaration too and question me so that I can say something in your favor. Because he's not giving me any, like, I would like explain things. Like, he's like, well, you were up there that. I said, yeah, but that didn't mean I was up with Amber going over this huge plot. I go, I'm with Amber like 5, 10, 15 minutes, half an hour at most, and I'm there to work. And so I don't know, any of this. And
Laura was an interior decorator for Elon Musk as well, and she said that she couldn't afford $20,000 to be deposed because she didn't know what was going on with him. I'm guessing this was around the timeline that he was selling all of his homes, so he wouldn't have needed an interior decorator.
I was literally forced into signing a declaration that, again, does not say, it's the most vanilla thing imaginable, but I can't afford $20,000 because I don't even know what's going on with Elon right now. But I need your attorneys to sit there and work out a declaration so that I'm in your favor, so it nulls anything out. Because I didn't see, because he's like, well, did you see her absolutely beaten up? And he was using the analogy of, well, if my arm was ripped off.
She testified in the UK trial that she felt uncomfortable and pressured, and that the statement was in Waldman's words, not hers. He was the one who wrote it, and she just signed it. This may not be totally unusual for witness statements, and I know Depp actually said a similar thing during his cross-examination during the UK trial, where he claimed that he had only read part of his witness statements before signing them and going to the trial, which is his explanation for why there was an inconsistency with his initial account of the headbutting incident. Lawyers, being the ones to draft witness statements, don't necessarily seem out of the ordinary. But in the Virginia trial, one of Depp's lawyers questions Rocky Pennington on whether or not anyone helped her write her statement for the trial in the UK.
Did you write this witness statement yourself? Yes. I'm sorry, I didn't catch that.
Yes.
Thank you. Did anyone help you write this?
No.
Did Amber Heard help you write this?
No.
Did Amber Heard's counsel help you write this?
No.
Again, this just seems like an odd line of questioning when multiple witnesses on your end, including your client, are on the record admitting that they didn't write their witness statements at all. Laura Diver gives this testimony, and Depp's lawyers are pretty openly unhappy about it. Waldman, an American lawyer not involved in the trial but present in court watching, put out a tweet that said, "In memory of Elon Musk's decorator, Laura Diver." This was brought up the next day in court to the judge, and the judge basically gave a warning and said that people in attendance should not be putting out messages that can be construed as threats. Waldman was also named during the UK trial as the person who sent Johnny's bodyguard Sean Bett a photo to attach to his witness statement that Bett, a former cop, claimed in the statement that he had taken himself as proof of alleged injuries from the April 2016 incident. But the photo was found to actually have been from a year prior, in March 2015. This is also interesting, since Johnny's legal team has been relentlessly accusing Amber of faking the photos in various ways, but they have in fact been the only ones who have been caught falsifying evidence like this. This sort of behaviour from Waldman continued though, as he leaked more stuff to the press, including information he was explicitly supposed to not leak, which resulted in the original judge in the Virginia suit throwing him off the case. Another interesting case of Johnny's that Waldman is involved in is his alleged assault of location manager Rocky Brooks on the set of City of Lies in 2017. Rocky claims that he was instructed by the director to tell Depp that they were running out of time for the location permits, and that Depp angrily screamed at him, punched him twice, and offered him $100,000 to punch him in the face, presumably so he wouldn't be sued. He says he refused and that his bodyguards came and pulled Johnny away from the situation. He claims that Johnny was noticeably drunk during the incident, but the next day Johnny apologized and they hugged it out and took a photo together. The next week, however, Rocky claims he was asked to sign a declaration stating that he wouldn't sue the production, and when he refused, he was fired immediately. He also alleges that he was put on a no-hire list as a result of this, and he's never encountered an incident like this in his 25 years of production experience. He says multiple people who have tried to hire him since the incident have told him that Depp has blacklisted him. Now, originally, Depp's lawyer, including Wallman, claimed that the alleged assault was a matter of self-defense. They now are claiming that the alleged assault is a big hoax on behalf of the location manager, and that in fact, Johnny never hit him, and they have a witness statement from the script supervisor stating that Johnny was completely sober and that the confrontation as described by Brooks never happened. She claims that Johnny was actually just verbally standing up for a homeless black woman that the location manager was yelling racial slurs at, and that there was never any contact between the two. Brooks' lawyer responded to these allegations by saying that they were untrue and defamatory. He noted that Brooks himself was homeless for a time and that Depp can say whatever he wants, but to create this fabrication that goes to the heart of who Rocky is, it's killing him. Brooks was asked about this in his deposition. He claims that there was no homeless people on the set because it was a closed set. When Johnny went in to do his deposition, after, he claimed that the woman was an elderly extra and that's why she was on set. Obviously, being an extra doesn't preclude someone from being homeless, but it seems like the story is changing a bit. The other part of this case that is odd is what he said in his British GQ interview in October of 2018. Johnny did a profile with British GQ as an attempt to respond to a deeply unflattering profile that came from an interview he did with Rolling Stone over the summer. This is the article that was released 2 months before Amber published the op-ed. In the article, he calls Amber a liar and questions why she didn't cooperate with the police or go get checked out by an EMT during the May incident. So Depp was actually the first party to break the agreement they signed during the divorce to not talk about their relationship to the press. But, anyway, while he's talking about this, the interview asks him if he considered himself a violent man. In the print version of this article, he admits to hitting the location manager that was suing him. He says, "I have freely admitted, and it is known, yes, I have been arrested for assaulting a hotel room once, and I smacked the location manager, and he called the cops on me." But in the web version, that whole part was removed, with a retraction saying that the print version inaccurately attributed a quote to Johnny Depp. Now, we don't know what happened with the location manager, but it is a bit suspicious that a quote where he admitted to doing the thing he's been accused of was removed like this. He very clearly has the power and willingness to have his team clean up messes like this. Now, to be fair, I do think they probably were given a little wiggle room because of the way that first part of the removed sentence was editorialized. He's had 2 separate arrests for hotel room shenanigans. One involved wrecking a room, and the other involved assaulting a hotel security guard. Despite the question being specifically about violence, his team probably argued that he was referring to a separate hotel arrest, where he was only arrested for causing property damage in the hotel room, and they were misquoting him by adding the word worker in brackets. But the rest of that sentence was pretty obviously a direct quote that would have been recorded by the reporter, and he said explicitly that he smacked the location manager, and in the end, they were able to get that part cut out. There's also a bit of evidence for his alleged willingness to exert his power to try to blacklist people he's upset with. In 2015, when he found out that the people making London Fields using a nude body double for Amber's character, he sent multiple angry emails to his agent at the time, because the movie was going to be premiered at the Toronto Film Festival. In the all caps one on top, he says they are nobodies in the business, and threatens to ruin them instantly if they don't shut the movie down. 2 weeks after his initial email, the movie was pulled from the Toronto Film Festival in response to legal action on part of the movie's director. In the end, the movie's release was delayed until 2018. In the UK trial, Ayo testified that he'd spoken to a number of people who had seen or heard what had happened and were in the entertainment industry, who were afraid that speaking up about what they'd seen would result in being blacklisted by Johnny's entertainment industry connections. He claimed that they tried to do it with him, and he started to say something about his agent but was cut off by Johnny's lawyer. After Amber filed the restraining order in 2016, Depp texted his sister, who was a former Warner Brothers producer, to try to get Amber removed from Aquaman. He was supposedly almost successful in this task, but they ended up keeping her. During the trial, Johnny tried to explain the text away by saying he was the one who got her the role, which is an interesting argument to make when you're trying to assert that you weren't the one with almost all the power in the relationship. I don't know if you can simultaneously say that you were easily able to give someone the biggest job they've ever had in their life in a massive superhero movie, but also that people in the industry wouldn't feel pressure to stay quiet or feel like their careers weren't at risk if they ever opposed you. This is not just an ordinary relationship where one person has more money, but things are overall on pretty uneven grounds. Johnny has hundreds of millions of dollars and has been earning tens of millions of dollars a year for decades. At this point, he gets paid $20, $30, maybe $40 million a movie. And according to the financial documents from the divorce, during their relationship, Amber was making less than $400,000 a year before managers, agent fees, publicist fees, and so on. According to these documents, she was being paid $65,000 to do Magic Mike and $31,000 to do The Danish Girl. When all business expenses were subtracted, her excess revenues were around $50,000 a year. In contrast, he had owning a private island money. According to his former managers, Johnny had 40 full-time employees. That creates an undeniable power imbalance between them because of the way it structures their lives. That means their relationship is surrounded at all times by the people working for him and who will keep tabs on her if he asks. It again means that the bodyguards are there to protect him and his physical well-being, and they'll certainly protect her if he asks them to, but if he's the one putting her in physical danger, he's not going to ask for that. I mentioned before that Johnny was replacing her doctor and her therapist with doctors and therapists that he liked and who he was paying, and who he seemed to expect would be loyal to him. Amber claims she discovered from the disclosures during the UK trial that since Johnny was paying for these private doctors, all the things she was saying to her therapist, Dr. Cohen, was being relayed to Johnny because she had given permission for him to share things with Dr. Kipper. She also mentioned that his longtime stylist began dressing her. She's spoken extensively about how much he didn't like her wearing revealing clothing, and if you're someone who wants to control your wife's wardrobe, bringing in a loyal stylist who you're paying to pick her clothes out seems like an effective way to do that. It also seems like his controlling behavior got much worse when she was working. She claimed that when production would put her up in hotels, he would get her a better hotel room, and then would use that hotel phone to monitor and confirm she was there, and would then get upset if she wasn't able to answer the phone immediately. He admitted,
Look at the bigger picture.
I
What are
become
the things
irrational
that
when you're doing movies. I become jealous and fucking crazy and weird, and we fight a lot more.
got jealous and crazy when she worked, and this began to affect how she could work. Her acting coach said that she overheard Johnny telling her that certain roles would reflect badly on him, and that he told her, if you weren't going to do something great and huge, then I don't want you doing it. This acting coach also said that Amber turned down taking another guest campaign, even though it was a lot of money for her, because Johnny didn't want her modeling. The acting coach also said she frequently had to wait before sessions with Amber because she'd hear them fighting, particularly in the last year. last year. Johnny also called the lawyer Amber had hired for the purposes of negotiating her end of the post-nuptial agreement, called her names, and then fired her. There are also recordings of him that make it very clear that he was the authoritative one in the relationship and he wouldn't have tolerated it being any other way.
It's deceitful. You already you had trouble with me before when you said to me that you didn't feel like you were told when I was recording you. So please stop.
You didn't.
Please stop.
You did not tell me.
Please stop.
Fucking acknowledge what I'm saying before you keep making demands. You are not a school teacher. Shut the fuck up. Listen to me, and then you can fucking respond. Understand? You ain't nobody's fucking mom. You ain't no school teacher. Don't fucking pretend to be authoritative with me.
Okay, fine.
You don't exist.
Leave it on.
In my opinion, the biggest tactical mistake she made in this whole ordeal was not taking everything she was entitled to in the divorce settlement. Based on the timing, I'm guessing she had just signed on to Aquaman earlier that year, and she was getting her first real big superhero movie-sized paycheck, and didn't think the divorce money was worth being called a gold digger, so she took less and pledged to just donate it. Strategically, this is not great, because she ended up with someone who essentially has unlimited resources involving her in multiple lawsuits and costing her millions of dollars in legal fees. The fact that she hasn't been able to donate at all has been the number one thing his legal team has hammered her on, because they haven't actually been able to catch her in any lies about the abuse, and they need to be able to call her a liar. So, despite knowing full well that it was always supposed to be paid annually over a 10-year time period, knowing that she communicated her difficulties paying with the charities, knowing exactly why she doesn't have the money to pay it, knowing that the money is her money and that she was entitled to in the divorce, and the agreement to donate to charity was between her and the charity, they've latched onto her saying donate instead of pledged to donate on 2 occasions, and used that to discredit everything she's ever said. The ACLU had a representative who testified that her most recent payment was in December of 2018. She was sued 3 months later. Amber said during the Virginia case that she had already spent $6 million on legal fees up to that point. You obviously can't go against Johnny Depp without very expensive lawyers, and again, I think in many ways the UK trial was a test run for his team, but also possibly a strategic effort to drain resources on her end because they know exactly how much money she has, and they know how difficult they've made finding work for her. The whole defamation suit hinged on the idea that he had lost roles because of the op-ed, which was a proxy for the initial abuse allegations that they couldn't sue over. But they ended up having to base this entire argument on him not being in the next Pirates movie, which so far still doesn't exist. This argument ignores the fact that there were questions about the Pirate franchise continuing at all when the 5th movie underperformed. These are extremely expensive movies to make. The 4th movie is still the most expensive movie ever made, and while they cut costs a bit on the 5th one, it didn't make as much as they expected it to. The career issues for Johnny had started well before the relationship ending. In 2015, he was described by Forbes as the most overpaid actor in Hollywood, and it wasn't even close. According to them, Johnny brought in $1.20 for every dollar he was paid. The person in second on the list brought in $6.50 for every dollar paid. As multiple people, including his former agent, testified, he was a lot of trouble on set because he reportedly kept showing up drunk and late. By the time he was shooting Pirates, he was getting complaints about showing up 6 to 8 hours late and leaving the crew and hundreds of extras waiting for him, and that costs a lot of money. Obviously, big stars are given a lot of leeway on things like this, but they do have to be able to actually shoot the movies, and if the movies aren't making money, the absurdly high salary and higher production costs start to outweigh the benefits of their star power. The big movie role that he lost because of the abuse allegations was the Fantastic Beasts movie, which he only lost because he chose to sue the Sun, and lost. Before the suit, the director and J.K. Rowling were vocally defending his casting, and there is nothing to suggest that they wouldn't continue if the lawsuit hadn't happened. And it's of note that he was also still paid his full salary to not be in the movie. The then CEO of Disney, Bob Iger, was asked about Johnny and the abuse allegations against him less than a month after the restraining order was filed, and he basically said that even if the scandal didn't pass, it didn't matter, because they have Jack Sparrow, and audiences would separate it. This idea that domestic abuse allegations are something that regularly destroys Hollywood careers is kind of laughable, especially domestic abuse allegations that aren't accompanied by criminal charges. Look at Brad Pitt. He, like Johnny Depp, is one of the most famous actors in the world. In 2016, his marriage also ended with allegations of abuse, and his career in the years since has gone on exactly as it was before. He and Angelina were married for less than 2 years. They were together for longer, but they only married in 2014. In September 2016, following an alleged incident on a private plane, Angelina filed for divorce. Allegedly, Brad was said to have gotten drunk on the plane, was arguing with Angelina, and when one of the older children stepped in, he hit the child. I think he claims that any physical contact was accidental. While they were on the plane, a call was made to Family Services, and the FBI did an investigation because they were in the air. Her divorce attorney was Laura Wasser as well, and TMZ obviously got the exclusive on their divorce announcement. TMZ also ended up getting the exclusive from Laura Wasser a couple years later when Laura was quitting the case because it was getting too messy. Angelina has reportedly since alleged domestic violence in addition to violence against the children. Again, they've been going at it in court for the past 6 years. It's been a little more private since there are children involved, so more court documents are sealed, but some are still available. The temporary custody agreement that they've been fighting over has previously required Brad's visit with the children to be supervised. It's not totally clear if that part of the agreement is still in place, as there are conflicting reports, but for at least a few years, he was required to have a therapist present during his time with him. And most recently, Brad is suing Angelina for selling her shares of their winery. Brad Pitt's publicists have been pumping out stories about how Angelina is tearing him away from his kids and how sad he is primarily by US weekly exclusives, basically ever since the divorce. Angelina, who famously didn't have a publicist at all until 2017, has communicated rarely with the tabloids, but has made a very few pointed comments in interviews about how personal the domestic violence and child abuse issues are to her. After the marriage with Brad, I think she's publicly ignored Brad's ongoing tabloid updates, but she has noted that she's moved to a home that's only 5 minutes away from Brad so the kids can be close to their dad. Her primary public response to this seems to be advocating for changes to the legal system to take domestic abuse and child abuse more seriously. She was in attendance at the White House a couple of months ago when Biden reauthorized the Violence Against Women Act, which interestingly was what Amber's op-ed at the center of the Johnny Depp's defamation case was advocating for. Angelina has especially focused on developing technology that will make it easier to detect bruising on children of color.
It's personal, and I won't say very much. But if somebody comes in and assaults us, you look at me and you look at Ruth, you have a better chance of seeing bruises on me. So anybody with darker skin is going to have less chance at justice. And
it's an inequity.
Yes, it is absolutely
systemic.
biased.
Absolutely.
It's biased forensics.
She's 100% right about this. But the implication here is obviously that Brad got away with child abuse because the child they investigated wasn't white. Throughout all of this, Brad Pitt's career has been completely unaffected. He continues to make a lot of critically acclaimed movies, and he won his first Oscar for an acting performance in 2020. This is over the exact same time period as Johnny's abuse allegations, in an arguably more complicated situation with a much more high-profile actress making the allegations. This is a norm, though, despite Johnny's claims about not having a voice, the facts are that his side of the story was always the one that dominated the press. Public opinion was in his favor from the second she filed the divorce documents. That never shifted when she filed the restraining order or after, and her career was always the one that the abuse allegations put in danger. This is getting really long, and this video has already gone all over the place, so I think I might cut things here and split the second half, focusing more on the public's response to this case and other high-profile abuse cases into a part 2. If anyone actually watches this, sorry this is such a mess, but hopefully having some of this stuff recorded in one place will give at least a couple people a better understanding of what happened here, and will maybe help when people are inevitably looking back on this case and reassessing how she was treated throughout all of this. I'll just end with a reminder that the day they signed the divorce settlement and their whole story together should have ended, Johnny texted Christy and Karina saying that he was going to need his text messages and promising that he would stop at nothing to deliver Amber total global humiliation.